Uh, well, where did it start? When I first started working with music, it was more of a hobby. I grew up in a family which was very musical. Just my mother was the one who was very musical. She had all her friends used to either play an instrument or used to sing. Also, being Christian, being part of the church, that was a big part of their upbringing. So naturally, music was a big part of our growing up. All the beach parties and things like that, or like a friend's house that we had dinner. Inevitably, they'd end up at the piano. Someone had a guitar and they'd be singing. So it started as like that. In fact, when I went to college, I thought that I wanted to go into. I actually majored in fine art. I didn't even know I wanted to do music. When I came back to Pakistan, uh, I started working with Coke Studio. So that was my very first exposure to doing music commercially and not as just a hobby. So I started doing Coke Studio. I was part of the backing vocalist lineup, and then gradually sort of moved on to. Didn't move on to anything. So I was at Coke Studio. I just started with Coke Studio as a backing vocalist. And at the same time, just so happened that Levi's was doing a campaign which was reinventing old songs. And at that time, I wasn't sure which song. I just remember that I really loved this Bichra Yaar, which was by Strings. And I knew there was just a beautiful composition and I just wanted to reinvent it my own way. And that was with a cappella, because I'd just come back from New York. I studied in college. I loved the a cappella groups. I loved how they would take everything and just merge it into just voices, no instruments whatsoever. So I thought I'd treat the music that way, and I did it. And released it, and it was just one of those very lucky breaks. It just went absolutely viral, and this was the beginning of YouTube. So it went viral, went crazy, and I think at that point one didn't even understand what was it to be viral. I think that was also a new thing at that point. And I just so happened to be doing a concert also. My friend had helped me do this concert, and I said, "Chalo, let's थोड़े बहुत लोग आए, let's see how many people come." We weren't sure. But I think the combination of being on Coke Studio, which was, aired on about 20 channels, the combination of releasing this song for Levi's and going viral on YouTube, the show was sold out. And it was just, that was the first time that I realized, okay, wait, there's something here. Then it being more than just a hobby. And I loved actually being on stage, so much so that even when I was a child, what we used to play stage, concert, we'd get, learn songs and we'd perform them. So that's where it started, right? Very innocently, very, hobby driven. And then I guess being part of Coke Studios, trying to take things more seriously, being on stage, I started to try to, get more formal education in music. And that's when I had Ustad, Sami Saab, Ka Gharana se, we had an Ustad who was teaching me for a while, and my sister. And that was my first formal actual the trajectory started moving more towards this focused, more educated way of going into it. So that's how that happened, and then and I guess from there it just took off. And I think my major thing has been, even though I was always writing songs. I think my real love of music is being on stage and being a performer and working off of the energy of the audience. So. And another thing that happened at that point, as far as the Coke Studio happening, that song going viral, there was also a very big part of my life and my time was in musical theatre. As soon as I'd come back from New York, I'd gone there to study. And when I came back to Pakistan, I just knew that I wanted to be part of the music scene. And there was a musical theatre play going on called Chicago, which I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with. But in Chicago, I think their Mama Morton had to go to college and this role had to be filled. And so I came and I filled Mama Morton's role. And that's how I was exposed to the musical theatre scene in Pakistan. And then from there we did Mamma Mia, and that it did so well. I mean, we had full houses almost every evening. So that kind of is also coming back to the fact that I just love being on stage. I love the live act of being on stage. And something that I've not ever grown completely comfortable with in my career is actually going into recording music. So I love writing music, but when it comes to production, something slows down. You're in a studio, you're producing a song, you're not in front of an audience, right? You're not feeding off people's energy, and so it's a very different world. But I guess writing music was something that I always did. I think I first picked up the guitar when I was about 14, and while other people were, playing all the songs that that they had heard, four chords that they would learn and play. For me, it was taking those four chords and making my own song, right, and innovating something. So writing something, wanting to create something was something that I didn't really have to think about. I just enjoyed doing it. From that point to now, what has changed? Well, I guess when I was doing the music then, it was passion driven. When it became a career, then it kind of changed its shape. I think was doing a lot more shows. I was doing more commercial shows. The choices that you make are very different. And now, so many years later, about 20, how many years later, I guess I really started my musical career in 2007. It's now 2024. How many years is that? That's like, yeah. So to date, I guess now I've kind of taken a step back and I want to go back to the passion of music and just writing and working on the music that I want to do versus making music that I think that people want to listen to, right? I used to write in English, I used to think in English, and that was difficult trying to be an artist in Pakistan because, the diaspora, you've got more people wanting to listen to Urdu music, there's a lot of people, following the Punjabi music, and of course, that was an Eastern music. That was not my world. I grew up as a jazz singer. But I guess with Coke Studio, I went into that whole world. I did it for a long time. And now I'm trying to merge the two and find this interesting marriage between jazz, which I loved, and then this whole world of Sufi and Eastern classical music that I was exposed to through Coke Studio. And I'm actually working with the producer now in South Austin, and we're trying to merge those two worlds, not like typical fusion music way that people try to do fusion music. We're trying to do something a lot more, I don't know whether you would call it educational or scholastic way. So we're trying that right now. So interesting that you mention, a split of identity. I think this identity split is something that I felt before I even ever came to America. Before I even stepped off Pakistani soil, I felt a split in identity. I think a big part came from it coming from an English-speaking family. That was one thing. Second was the religious. I won't say that there was a religious divide, but just the mere fact of being a non-Muslim, being from a Christian family, and that also not a Christian family, a half Christian, half Parsi family. Father was Zoroastrian, mother was Christian. So that also, it was like I was a minority within a minority. And then also, just speaking, being from an English-speaking family and growing up with the kind of music that my parents were listening to is something that already made me quite outside the community and the culture that was going on in Pakistan. I grew up listening to musical theatre, all the great, English musicals. My mother was listening to that on her cassette. She was listening to ABBA. She was listening to the Beatles. Listening to a lot of jazz. My grandmother listened to a lot of jazz. I grew up listening to Ella Fitzgerald and Louis Armstrong. These are things that I grew up with. So much so to the point that I don't think I ever heard Nazia Hassan before the age of 15. I never heard, maybe Idhur Udhar I would have heard a little bit here and there, but I think the only Pakistani artist who I listened to is Sajjad Ali. And I remember the first cassette that I actually bought was a Sajjad Ali cassette. So that was really the only exposure that I had. I was never exposed to Eastern classical, or qawwalis or Sufi music. That came later. When I left Pakistan and I went to college abroad in New York, there was this certain homesickness that came over me. I was depressed for the first couple of years, moving out of Pakistan, being away from family, being away from my culture. And suddenly there was this recognition of, oh, there's something about home that I miss, right? And that's when I actually started listening to Pakistani music. That's when I started listening more to my Sajjad Ali, more to the Nusrat Fateh Ali, listening to, all this music. And that's when, that kind of came in. And then when I came back from college and I joined Coke Studio, there was even more of an exposure to Eastern classical and qawwalis and, all this kind of music. So I would say that it was just inevitable that, my jazz background, my musical theatre background was obviously going to shape the way that I sang, I remember even in Coke Studio, we were trying to harmonize in some Sufi song and Ravi Ayat said, he was like, there's no harmonies in this genre of music, harmonies hote hi nahi. And we were like, why? Like harmonies are so cool. from our musical theatre days. And so, there was this always just this ache to merge the two. So I think that's how that came about. So I started off majoring in art, and I think that I was not sure. I think throughout college, what I wanted to do with my life, even I think at that point, that was when I was actually even wrote that song Raat Gaye, or Quarter to Three. I wrote it in English, which talks about quarter to three, late after midnight, and she's still awake, wondering who she is and what she'll ever be. Right? She never know, and that was something that I felt back then. Even when I was a visual artist, even when I was painting. And I guess I majored in art, but when I got out of college, I found out there was a very lonely subject that I had chosen, because you're kind of on your own painting until you actually exhibit and then you go out. And at that point, I wanted to collaborate with more people, and then music kind of just, naturally, came into play when I started actually, working in the outside world, outside college. I don't see a connection necessarily between the two, between fine art and music. I think they're just, I guess, the only connection is that they both require creativity, and they both require that you really let go. And I think they're both mediums that if you try too hard, you're going to affect the outcome. And I would notice that, especially when I was doing my thesis in art, that, anytime that I would think too hard about something or really want it to turn out a certain way, that's when it would not exactly be what I wanted. And the things that happen the easiest and just spontaneously and very fast, those are the things that actually really were good, and I noticed that with art, and I noticed that with music and the songs that did well. So I guess that's the only connection that I can make between the two. Musicscape of Pakistan has changed a great deal from when I first started to where it is right now. In fact, weirdly enough, now I'm feeling a bit like a dinosaur in our music industry, because the shape that it's taken, it's gone into this hip hop, digital, electronic hip hop genre, which is something that I really wanted to do, and I did experiment with it a little bit, but it's definitely taken that turn. And even in the newer Coke Studio, seasons, you'll see it's gone very electronic. So I think that this was a necessary thing that did need to happen. Things, just by virtue of social media, artists are so much more in control of putting out their own work and not being, shaped by a label or by a channel who decides who is put there for public consumption. I mean, that's what's changed. This is, I guess, now it's a very cliche dialogue, right, about how social media has changed changed music, because we've been talking about it for so long, and we were actually talking about it while it was happening, and now it's finally happened, to the point that, and now with AI, like, music is so easy, like, to put a song. One of my friends just sent me a song, which was basically, she had instructed AI what kind of lyrics she wanted. They wanted to be semi in my voice, and it was a song. It made up its own song with my vocals, and lyrics which were personalized. And it's crazy. Like, in fact, it scares a lot of us as musicians, because it makes you feel like you might be kind of not needed at some point. Of course, live music is never going to change. There's always going to be that world out there, but the production of music has changed so significantly. I listen to so much music right now that is coming out, and it's like, there are loops and things that I recognize online, and it's like AI could have generated it. So music has really changed, and I think it's got to the point where it's very difficult to say where it's going to go. But I will say that it's growing. I think there's all these artists that are coming out, younger artists who are coming out of Pakistan and doing tremendously well. Even now they're saying that the borders have also opened up with India, so a lot of exchange is happening between India and Pakistan as well. So I see it as a very exciting time, but also daunting, because we feel as the older artists that we're kind of being left behind. And therefore, I think this move to Austin, my life here as a musician, actually going back and really exploring why I love music in the first place is perfect, because I'm not trying to keep up with anything. I'm just trying to stay true to myself. So where my music is going right now is actually, I've kind of taken a step back from the music because I really wanted to take the monetary influence out of music. I think a lot of the choices that I was making, the shows that I was doing, the commercial shows that I was doing, where I was flying to do those shows, was very guided by the fact that, they were paying me. They were shows, it was work. At the end of the day, it became a job. I wanted to take that financial burden off the music, and that's why in Austin I'm actually a realtor now. I work as a realtor, so and that's been going very well. So the music, I think it's still evolving to where it should be only hobby, but at the end of the day, I really love doing shows, and even though I want to be doing, I feel like I'm not saying this correct. I feel like there's a natural evolving that's taking place with the music, in that I'm doing the shows that I really want to do with the people that I really want to do them, and I'm not doing or producing something for the sake of it doing well or to be part of some campaign or with some intention that I want to be popular, it has to go viral, or it has to touch this and this, demographic of people. There's no weight on it anymore. So that allows me to really do the things that I want to do. And some of the projects that I'm working on, as I mentioned before, there's a producer in South Austin who I found, who's an absolute, he's a genius. He's just a genius. And, there's so many talented musicians out here in Austin, people who I can really look up to and I'm in awe of. And those are the kind of people that I want to be around. I think that's my next step, is being around people who I'm like, oh my God, I worship these people. I want to be around those people. I want to be making music with them. And one such person is this producer who's helping me merge the jazz with the Eastern. We're trying to almost scat in jazz. If you've heard scatting in jazz, we're scatting in Saregama. Just like Nusrat Fateh Ali did, but we're doing it with a very jazz feel. So, that I see that as my trajectory, a more of a world music feel. Obviously a wider audience, not just, Desi audience, but, just people from all around the world listening. I just want to work with different musicians, and I always go back sometimes, not always, but sometimes I'll read these old interviews of mine, and when people would ask me, where do you see yourself 10 years from now? And I remember writing, pretty much in all of them, I would say I'd want to travel the world. I'd want to work with different artists, and I would want to do, my music in a big band or like an orchestra setting. And that's sort of the direction. It's kind of, I already see that happening, especially with moving to Austin, being exposed and around so many musicians and working with people who are, on an international level. And I would like to make another album, keeping jazz and Sufi in mind. And another big dream is to write a musical theatre piece, which would be obviously in English, because I think, and I write in English, but it would be set in Pakistan. So let's see where that goes.